Now, we're all still reeling, of course, having witnessed the terrible images that have come out of Las Vegas in the past 24 hours. But I think what shocked me the most anyway is just how familiar this all feels, and that is something we should talk about. This will happen again. It always does, and it always happens the same way, and it goes like this. First, you have a shooting, you have the chaos, you have a police response to neutralise the situation, and inevitably, you have the world's attention turned to the shooter. Here, we have a man with no criminal record, no ties to religious or terror groups, and as far as his family knows, no mental health issues, and no military or weapons training.
Not an avid gun guy at all. The fact that he had those kind of weapons is just... Where the hell did he get automatic weapons? He has no military background or anything like that. I mean, when you find out about him, like I said, he's a guy who lived in a house in Mesquite and drove down and gambled in Las Vegas. He did stuff, ate burritos.
And yet, he was a man capable of pulling off a military-grade attack on US soil. And this will happen again. Next comes the political response. Here's how the president, Donald Trump, described it.
It was an act of pure evil.
But that's hiding something, and language like that always does. The truth is, the thing about this act is not how evil it is, but how incredibly ordinary it's become. And this will happen again. And so we see family and friends line up to express their shock at the actions of this regular guy. And this will happen again. And while all this is happening, small pockets of America and the rest of the world will reflect on these numbers. Over the last 50 years, per capita, the number of guns in America has doubled from 1 for every 2 people to 1 for every 1 person. There are now more than 300 million guns in the USA.
The access issue to weaponry in this country is now a national security issue. It just is, because you have to minimize the capacity for someone who is either crazy or a terrorist, right, or in between, to be able to kill that many people so quickly.
And as it always happens, now we see a minority of politicians address their gun culture and say things like, our grief isn't enough. We can and must put politics aside, stand up to the NRA and work together to try to stop this from happening again. And you would think, after a mass shooting, especially the deadliest in modern US history, gun reform may actually happen. But that's not what happens. But even though that's not what happens, gun-loving Americans fear it might.
Their basic view is if we allow even the smallest concession, that somehow guns are going to be taken away from everybody.
And so instead of seeing a reduction, just the talk of gun reform will see Americans flock to gun stores today. Since the Las Vegas attack, shares in the biggest gun manufacturers in the US have surged. They always do. American outdoor brands, which used to be called Smith & Wesson, and Sturm, Ruger & Company, have rallied nearly 4% since last night's shooting. And this will happen again. When 14 people were killed after the 2015 San Bernardino attack, one gun show operator estimated his business went up 50%. In 2013, 1 year after 20 children between the ages of 6 and 7 and 6 teachers were gunned down at Sandy Hook Elementary, US gun makers produced almost 11 million guns. That's twice as many as they had made 3 years earlier. And so, with Americans out today buying more guns than they were yesterday, what's the NRA got to say? Nothing. And even that will happen again, because that's what they do every time. After 49 people were gunned down in Orlando in 2016, the last deadliest mass shooting in US history, they took 2 days to respond. And tomorrow or the next day, they'll be back doing what they always do, lobbying politicians to make sure that absolutely nothing changes.
Do you know that Congress will not allow the Center for Disease Control to study gun violence? They're not allowed to study it because the notion is that by studying it the same way we do with traffic accidents, somehow that's going to lead to everybody's guns being confiscated.
That's because the NRA spends more than $3 million every year just on lobbying politicians, and this will happen again next year. But the NRA also makes donations, which isn't counted as lobbying. Last year, the NRA reportedly spent $30.3 million in support of Donald Trump. And that's why, instead of even allowing themselves to understand the actual causes of this shooting, we get this.
It was an act of pure evil.
It's too easy to say that. It's too easy to make this about one person and not a nation in denial. It's too easy, in the aftermath of this attack, to celebrate the brave community response, but not to cry that there's no brave political one. And it's too easy to mourn the victims and choose to do nothing to protect them. 11,660 people have been killed by guns in the US this year. And this will happen again.